Welcome back, guys. Or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's my Toyota RAV4. And in this update video, I actually get to share 7 of the most interesting things that I have learned about this platform. Over the last 2.5 months and 3,400 miles of owning it, there's a few things that I really like. There's a few things that I don't necessarily like. And they're all very relevant, very important, because if you are potentially one of the million people considering buying one of these for the year 2025, or you're someday going to buy one of the used ones from 2019 to 2025, there's a lot of things that you guys might want to know before you purchase one, before you spend all of your hard-earned money. So today, I get to share my 7 most interesting things that I wish I knew about this platform before I bought one. And if you guys get anything out of this video, please consider liking it, comment your thoughts and opinions below, and subscribe if you haven't already. Otherwise, let's get right into it. The first thing worth mentioning is that my Hybrid SE, which MSRP'd with all of its options for about $39,000, is maybe not worth the $10,000 price premium over the base model Toyota RAV4 non-hybrid LE. I recently did a very quick walk-around review of one of those if you're interested in checking it out, but for $10,000, this vehicle really doesn't offer a lot more than that vehicle. Sure, it has a heated steering wheel, some heated seats, a power moonroof, black wheels rather than steelies with some hubcaps, and the hybrid powertrain system. But honestly, when you're driving it, when you're just looking at it, riding around in it, this doesn't feel like a $10,000 price premium. If you have the money to spare, sure, buy one of these. I don't regret my decision, but I am surprised at how good the base model was for about $29,000, and how if I were to do it again, I might have considered that and just save the money, because these extra features, while they are nice, they're not $10,000 nice. The second thing worth mentioning actually has to do with the wind and road noise. It doesn't necessarily bother me, although I know some of you do wonder about that, and it's probably the most asked question on any of my RAV4 videos or updates on this car. And I do think subjectively there is more wind noise, but not necessarily road noise, than a few of the other compact crossovers. Subjectively, this does seem to be louder on the inside when I'm going 65 to 80 miles an hour on the highway or the interstate, compared to what my Subaru Outback Wilderness does. But in this side-by-side comparison, where I compared a Wilderness to the LE trim level of the RAV, they actually had about the same basic decibel reading, but the RAV4 does seem a little bit more noisy, not necessarily from the tires, but definitely from the wind. Thankfully, though, when you have the windows partially down, or especially having the sunroof open, it doesn't create any weird buffeting, more so than any other compact crossover. And in fact, I actually think this sounds better with the sunroof open going highway speeds than my Outback ever did. Sometimes I would often close that because it was kind of obnoxious. This actually hasn't been that bad. Additionally, the stock speakers on this for my SE Hybrid is kind of just a middle of the road trim level. I do think they sound quite a bit better than the Outback speakers I had, and compared to a lot of the other non-premium audio from the other compact crossovers that I drive. And that was a pretty nice surprise getting into this. The third thing worth mentioning is, for this being roughly a $39,000 vehicle MSRP after all the options, there's a lot of cheap plastics in here. I do think they're going to age well, but they're not necessarily the nicest to touch, the nicest to feel. They definitely sound like hard plastics. They of course have enough compliancy that it's not actually going to be rough against your skin and uncomfortable, but Toyota does a good job making all the touch surfaces very soft and feeling rubbery and higher end, like the armrest pad right here. And it kind of blends in. It's not a drastically different color to the rest of the door card like some vehicles, but there is just a lot of plastics and a lot of things that can rattle on this. My vehicle was assembled in Japan. Typically, we have the assumption that Japanese assembled vehicles are the best assembled and that there was the most quality control put into those ones. So this is kind of an issue from the manufacturer designing it with all those plastics, which were basically the same exact interior on the LE $10,000 less example I drove. But also the quality control, even from the Japanese one, I get a lot of random weird little squeaks and rattles and creaks, but they don't seem to hang around for more than a few weeks at a time before that noise disappears and maybe another noise comes on. I do think fitment looks visually overall pretty good, but there's a lot of random little creaks that I sometimes get in this vehicle, even including on the drive home when I picked this up in another city and I drove a couple hundred miles back home. I noticed right away, and that's something that I didn't notice on my last vehicle. So while none of the wind noise or the cheap rattling plastics in this vehicle, if yours does happen to have some of those quality control issues, bothers me personally, Maybe they would in a couple of years, in a couple of decades. Most of my audience, most of you guys on average, are about 20 years older than me. So I know that some of us are more sensitive to noises and things not being the way they should be, but I personally am not bothered by this at all. I am bothered more by other issues. Like number 4, the fact that CABLEGATE is still a questionable thing on these. If you're unfamiliar, what that is on the hybrid components like this, the underneath high voltage cable is easily corroded. At least it has been. When I had the wheels taken off of mine recently, I can't actually tell if mine is the upgraded cable system. So if some of you guys know that, please comment below. But that is a situation to where the cable gets corroded from all the salt on the roads, all the moisture getting held into the cable and just corroding everything. And then it has to be replaced. And for a while, it seemed like it was getting replaced outside of warranty. A super expensive repair. And then the CABLEGATE issue became legit and the lawsuits came down and everything happened. So I think the earlier few years of these are covered now. I don't know about the last couple of years. I guess we'll see with time what happens. But comment below if you've had or if you've heard of a personal CABLEGATE story. Personally, I'm trying not to think about it too much. I don't necessarily keep my vehicles more than a couple of years, so it probably won't ever affect me. And after about 2 months when I did have the vehicle on a lift, it looked completely dry under there. And I have driven through snow and slush and rain and stuff like that. So I'm not necessarily that worried. I do think that has happened and really affected a few people. But maybe in that situation for CABLEGATE or any other concerns that you guys have, stay off of the forums and try not to worry about it. Just get your vehicle washed with an underbody spray from like a car wash every once in a while, unless you have a power washer and you do it yourself. Number 5 relates to the gas mileage. On this current tank of gas, I've gone 238 miles and my average is 32. While most of that is going 80 miles per hour interstate speed, that is not very good. When I got this car a few months ago, we were more in fall, so temperatures were in the 40s and the Fahrenheit range. Now, I mean, right now it's 35, but I've driven this through a lot of 10-degree Fahrenheit weather, and this thing suffers. It is really not getting the gas mileage that I was expecting. Part of that probably is due to my aftermarket wheels. They are a little bit heavier, a little bit beefier than the factory kind of economy car tires that came on this, the Dunlops. But still, to get 32 on average, sometimes after I fill up, if I take this on the interstate going 80, my first, 35, 40 mile drive, that is getting about 26 miles per gallon, which is definitely the worst. I have heard even from one of you guys that your RAV4 Prime at 80 miles an hour only gets about 30 miles per gallon as well. So the MPG on this, I think during the summer and driving around town is fantastic. When I first got this, I was getting like 45 around town. But now that I'm driving mostly on the interstate in cold temperatures, this thing is hardly getting above 30 miles per gallon. Number 6 kind of follows the same suit in that this is kind of a summer vehicle, but it's not the most off-road capable and it's not the most aggressively capable compact crossover. For instance, it has a payload capacity of, I believe, about 900 pounds, which is pretty aggressive, pretty comparable to a lot of the other compact crossovers, so it can hold 900 pounds worth of people and stuff in it. But the roof rails, which are sporty, they are lowered, they're only rated for 176 pounds, which is not a ton. I'm assuming that's static or dynamic. For reference, some of the Subarus or the Wilderness trim levels can hold 700 pounds on the top so they can have a rooftop tent. This vehicle is not designed for that. And then if you have a non-hybrid, it can tow about 1,500 pounds. If you have a hybrid like mine and you have a hitch, it can tow 1,750 pounds. The max I've ever seen on unibody crossovers is usually around 5,000 pounds. Some of the Subarus, for instance, can tow 3,500 pounds. But this, at half of that, 1,750, I don't even know if that could tow a small teardrop trailer, or if that's just going to be like a small little trailer to give you basically like a truck bed or something. You really can't tow a lot. You can't put a lot on the roof. And the payload capacity is about average for this class. And then I think the last thing worth mentioning, if you are new to not just the RAV4 but Toyota in general, is there is absolutely a Toyota tax. What I mean by that is Toyota and the dealerships don't really offer very many discounts, at least typically they don't. But the plus side of that is when you eventually go to sell your vehicle, it's going to hold the value better than a lot of the other comparative vehicles that maybe did offer much higher discounts. For example, this does compete against the Ford Escape. I have seen $5,000 off of MSRP on Escapes, but I've never seen more than $2,000 off of a Toyota RAV4. So just keep that in mind. There is a bit of a Toyota tax. You might have to pay a little bit more for services. You might have to pay a little bit more up front or even on insurance, but eventually you make that money back in reliability. sometimes in gas mileage, depending on your situation. But when you go to resell it, the money is still there because these are not as fluctuant with the market as some other vehicles. Ultimately, though, I think this is a really good vehicle, and I highly recommend you at least check one out. If you are in the market for a compact crossover, it has its pros, it has its cons. I've dived deeper into that in a lot of other videos, but overall, it has been a very good ownership experience. Now that I have several thousand miles, now that I've had it for almost 3 months, honestly, I'm not that disappointed, but I'm also not that surprised in what it has offered. It's just a good vehicle. It does everything reasonably well. It's not perfect in very many categories, but there's not too many downfalls, too many surprises, and I'm not surprised why so many people buy these every single year. But ultimately, guys, you do need to drive, you do need to purchase what you can afford and what you're going to be happy with. Because even the RAV4, even the best selling vehicle globally right now, about 1 million units a year, it's not perfect. The hybrids have the CABLEGATE issue. Some of the non hybrids have had the 8-speed transmission issue. So even these, while being very good, they're not perfect. But I personally really enjoy mine. And after driving a few hundred vehicles, I still really like it. So anyways, guys, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions below. What do you think of the RAV4? What do you think of the hybrid, the non-hybrid, and the prime? Comment all that below. Like this video if you got anything out of it, and subscribe. Otherwise, I wish you guys the best. I hope you take care. Until next time, see ya.